no more things I used to do. I don't do no more, for the Lord's made a change in me.
When you were talking about Aphrodite, I think that it was last week that I mentioned in an intro, but I rambled on so long I forgot to make the very point that I wanted to, which was about in my mind I had the dark triad, those types of people that we encounter. Now, in the last year of Alan's talks in 2020, he talked a lot about spirit, possession, demonic possession, and he would ask the question several times, signs and symptoms. What's the difference between psychopathy and possession? But when I was thinking about narcissism, I found this definition, and I read it, but I didn't elaborate on it. This is Manly P. Hall. He said to the Eleusinian philosophers, birth into the physical world was death in the fullest sense of the word. And the only true birth was that of the spiritual soul of man, rising out of the womb of his own fleshly nature. The soul is dead that slumbers, says Longfellow, and in this he strikes the keynote of the Eleusinian mysteries, just as Narcissus, gazing at himself in the water, and the ancients used this mobile element to symbolize the transitory, illusionary material universe, lost his life trying to embrace a reflection. So man, gazing into the mirror of nature and accepting as his real self the senseless clay that he sees reflected, loses the opportunity afforded by physical life to unfold his immortal, invisible self with a capital S. And, this is mystery school language here, but I think there's a lot of truth there, certainly in the Longfellow quote, the soul is dead that slumbers. Jesus said, let the dead bury their dead. There is something that breathes something into us. And again, you get back to pneumatic. It's a physical term, but I think it was you, Greg, who said, in the beginning was the word, but to say the word requires breath. There's the breath that comes before the act of creation that is carried in the word.
Mm-hmm.
And the just a couple of other things about the Redux that went up Sunday was one of the 2020. It was half of it at least. And Alan said, I used to say that if you have something, this spark inside of you that hit you, it might have always been there just waiting to get turned on, this thing that put you on a roller coaster of knowledge. And it is a roller coaster, and you can't switch it off once it starts. And it comes on like waves of, I've mentioned that it's like Gestalt, where everything that surrounds you. Now, here, what Graeme just shared about what Alan said, that spirit, everything that surrounds you, it isn't just coming into it, it's already there.
That's right.
And it's also in you, and it comes together inside your mind, if you want to call that your mind.
Exactly.
And I just loved that he said that, if you want to call that your mind. And he said, you understand that aha moment, as the occultists would say. But, he's saying something quite profound for an audience that may contain a lot of secular thinkers, et cetera, et cetera. But we are surrounded by spirit, whether we acknowledge it or not.
You know what? It's so true, and I think Jung possibly coined the phrase of synchronicity, but there's no way that he was the only one that discovered that, because this is again something that works through the eternal. And for me, I think synchronicity, we're so surrounded by synchronicities, and we have been our whole lives. And I'm sure, I hear the synchronicities when people talk, and just give their explanations of certain situations that they have or whatever. And I can see that, I can hear the synchronicities. They just think it's a coincidence. But it's not. It's something else animating you, something else breathing life into you. And the synchronicities are just unending. It's like you say that it's all around you, no matter what you do. As soon as you start, I think it has to do with purpose. It has to do with seeking something. It has to do with seeking more than self. Again, opening up to the others part of this. Absolutely being willing to be. If the way I see it is, I go in, if I look at anything, any kind of study material or any conversation I have with whoever it is, it doesn't really matter who it is. It doesn't matter to me. I take you at face value. I don't even think of these concepts that have been pushed, that that's a normie or the sheeple. Yes, I understand that, but I also understand that's where I've came from. Yeah, that's where I've came from. So you have to cut them a bit of slack. Come on. Yeah. So you go into every relationship, you go into everything, every study point, every interaction with either information or whatever it is. And I go in with the mindset of I'm going to be radically changed. Even though I have my own perceptions, I have my own opinions, I've studied a few things, I still go into every single interaction with anybody to be radically changed.
Yeah.
It's not everything I've got, every concept I've got in my mind right now, wipe it away. If somebody tells me something and it rings true and it changes my whole being, I'll be changed.
Yeah.
I'll be changed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In every interaction. And that's the way I go into it.
Well, I was lecturing down at a university in Southern Cal, and about 15 minutes into the lecture, it's 32 students in it. One kid come in that was late. Now he was one of the top 5 kids in the class, and I knew him fairly well because of all the interactions that had happened. And I was just getting ready to state a sentence, and I saw him walk in, and he started heading for his seat, and it changed my sentence.
Mhm.
Just his presence, and I knew, it affected me. And so that's what perichoresis is that when you totally open, you're going to get, thousands of bits of information are coming at you,
Yeah.
both, visual, audio, everything, and spiritual. And so part of what we're saying is, it's like a big thing happens to you that's very exciting in your life. And you have this great experience, this aha moment. Then you run off and I'll tell my wife. And as I'm telling my wife, I see something in the experience that I didn't even see when I had it because of her presence. And then I go to pick up the phone and I call my best friend. And as I'm describing what happened to him, I get something else. So those are all moments of perichoresis where if you're totally open to the other, they will, I used to call it a Vulcan mind meld, but that's not what's going on. It's like that thing I read off, that was in the other one, of Bakhtin, where, you've got separate consciousnesses, separate worlds, and they integrate and they affect us, but but each one of us are being affected differently, in our own worlds because of the worlds of the other. So it's not forcing us into one world.
Oh, a way that's helpful too is what you talked about earlier as relational Christianity and with your wife, egalitarianism,
Yeah.
Patriarchy, egalitarianism, and then this perichoretic. And when you give the mathematical equation, I'm not good at maths, but I understand this. So if you give that little equation, I think that might be helpful.
Well, yeah, we besides the intelligentsia, the upper class, the ruling class throughout history, we've dealt with the patriarchal or matriarchal. Examples have been shown that as well. And these are systems of marriage that, one basically is deemed the leader, and the other follows. There might be discussions and effects that you can have on the patriarch or matriarch, but they're going to have the decision. That's a really easy way to function within marriage. It's not the most fulfilling. And so in the 20th century, then we get thrust in with modernity into egalitarianism. And that's nothing more than, I'll put you through college, you put me through college. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. And it's that type of a, and we've done that for 150 years, and it's not really working that well either. It might be better as far as the satisfaction in marriage, but then with perichoresis, if you apply it to the concept of marriage, that's where I want A, my wife wants B, and if we both release into the relationship, into this swirling cauldron that informs and transforms us, then what if we do that right? I get A subprime B, and she gets B subprime A. Now, the mathematical language would be a small, like I would get A with a small b next to it. In other words, my A has been reconditioned. Mm-hmm. So it's not what I wanted originally. It's slightly different, but I'm getting something that's giving to her dignity and all the rest of it, her personhood, and she gets affected by me. And we've actually got examples of, just vision questing for, I get a certain job offer and she doesn't, and I can tell she does not like the city or where we're going to go, and I mean, she's spent a lot of her effort, like Melissa, becoming of age and bugging out of Texas and heading for Los Angeles, or however that happened. I don't know. But my wife was raised in Northern Illinois, and small town, and she couldn't wait to get out. And so then I get an offer back to Illinois to potentially teach. And as we were considering it, boy, she went deep and silent. And I could see this was not, and I'm the more aggressive of the two. So that's her input. And so I got to read that. And it took a while to get through that. And I had to start understanding, what it is that she didn't like in it, and obviating those things. And when she saw that I was concerned about her, that I cared about those things that she was concerned about, and that I'm willing to bend and, in fact, and for my PhD, I was supposed to go to London and study with a guy right in London. And he was doing exactly the same work I was wanting to do on spirit. And then we got there. I didn't like London, and my wife hated London because we were right in the city. And then the other two offers were up north, Aberdeen and St. Andrews. Well, she got up there, and my God, is that, the gauntlet come down, and she's headed for Scotland. Mm-hmm. I could tell. And so I've got this, and you got to weigh all these things. And in the end, that was really strange because I had 3 offers. And while we were over there, I couldn't make the decision. And I called my buddy at Nottingham. He was already a year into his PhD program there. And I'd left my family with him while I made this decision, because we came all the way across the ocean, and we didn't know, we're a month away from matriculation. We didn't know which college I was going to go to. And we got there, and I called my buddy and I said, I still can't decide. I've done the trip. I've talked to all my, Dr. fathers, and they all want me. And he said, well, go to Edinburgh and talk to this American that has 2 daughters the same age as your daughters. So he knows the land. He's an American. He knows all 3 of these professors. So he'll know which one's going to be best for that. So I thought, good idea. And so I headed down there, and it just felt right. And I met this guy for a 2-hour lunch that went 6 hours. And in the middle of it, he goes, damn, I wish you had, with that thesis, I wish you had applied here. And I said, well, after 6 hours of chatting with you, I wish I had too. And then he goes, are you serious? And I looked him right in the eye and I said, are you serious? And he says, it's only 2 phone calls. So, all of our apprehension of where we were wanting to go, it's like the Spirit couldn't have told us, because it wasn't even within the cognate We didn't even have that possibility.
Yeah.
And so, but we knew the whole way something was right about the trip over and where we were going. And when I called her and I said, we're going to Edinburgh, and so, that's all something that's kind of you can call it the underlying wavelengths of the universe, is in control. This Hilbert space, this, these possibilities that you can't even cognitively wrap your head around, and it's for a reason, because you're trying to do things synchronous with God, and and I'm not one of those that prays about everything like this, but I just had a sense that yes, we're supposed to go, but I don't know where. That just shows how weird it can get. So in that respect, I wanted A, she wanted B, we got C. So, but that's that whole thing of releasing.
It blows a hole in your equation, Greg.
Yeah,
I just realized as you were talking that I failed in setting up the entire meeting. I don't know if we should start over or if I should just if I should just say right here that that a big part of your theological studies have been on the Trinity and on this concept called perichoresis. Now, I was explaining perichoresis to someone a couple of days ago, and I think I did poorly. And it's recorded, it's going out into the universe in a couple of weeks' time. So, but I'll take a stab again, and then you can say where I got it right and where I got it wrong. But perichoresis is a Greek word. It's a conjunction or a combining of two words, and peri is around, and choresis is like a choreographed dance. So you are dancing around, and you can see this sometimes in the symbolism of the Trinity. They show that nicely, I think, and I can add a graphic in there. But it's the Father or God exists in time. And in order to relate to humans in time, he has Jesus who comes down into time. But to communicate with him, a little bit of God has to be in Jesus and a little bit of Jesus has to be in God. So we're talking humanity and the divine, if you will. And this dance is mediated by Spirit, Holy Spirit. And that could be love, but there's something that mediates between time and eternity. How did I do?
yeah. Well, that's the groundwork of the necessity. What perichoresis is it's huge. That's just one aspect of it, and like Moltmann, a German. Interestingly enough, Moltmann is a guy that, I think 16, 17 years old, he gets thrown out at the end of World War II and to help man a big cannon. And he doesn't last 10 days, 2 weeks, I think, and he's a prisoner of war. And then he's thrown up just outside Glasgow for a few years because they held those prisoner of wars for seven years in England. The Germans at that point. So, and then they offered him to get a master's. So then he ends up down outside of London for 5 more years doing a master's, and he picked theology. And so again, all of that was through English, where he, I argue that why he's a German that's so sensitive and has gotten a lot around perichoresis and the Spirit is because all of it was learned in English, where you have to parse between nous and pneuma, mind and spirit. And but he argues that it's the nature of the Trinity that as they're relating, they reflect each other, but according to their own character. So you have, so you can argue that God, in a sense, takes on. Like God operates, the Father, if you want to call it that, the Father operates on the eternal, but after the birth of Christ, his eternity becomes temporalized. So he's dealing and he's perceiving within a temporalized eternality. And in Christ, or us, the humans, are, when we're in relationship, our construction of reality is more of an eternalized temporality. So, in other words, you reflect from the other instantly. There's a bed made for you to mutuality through which to communicate. And if you can think of that tripart thing, where instead of just the us and the other, that wherever the thou and the I come together, something manifests between them. That's a Trinitarian ontology. So that I know, like dealing with this Nancy Murphy, and she just makes it simple and calls herself a monist. And then other kids in class would ask, well, what are you? And I would go, I'm a tripartite dual aspect monist. and everybody would laugh. But I was that, and so I'm trying to put this thing together before I'd even heard the term perichoresis. And it wasn't until I'm heading off for PhD level work and I'm reading Moltmann and he's using perichoresis, and I learned this term. And so if you want to learn that on the theological side, you go to anything that Moltmann's written on spirit or creation, the spirit of creation. He's got a good book on that. And so it's an entirely different ontology that to me makes sense of everything that's out there, way more sense than Greek dualism in that respect. And it's making sense and my first book my PhD was nothing more than going into 7 disciplines of thought and trying to find out where the next step is. And with the crashing dualism of Greek dualism, people are getting really creative on doing this. And it's one secular discipline after another. Perichoresis keeps popping up. They won't call it that. They won't call it spirit or even Christian concept of spirit. And that's what that study was, where I look at all 7 of these disciplines and I go, isn't this strange? We're getting the same dynamic in all of them. And then at the very end, I go, and this is what's happening theologically and how these things can help us learn our theology deeper. And then people like Jürgen went out of his way to grab me, and I'm a peon in the academic world. He's, a monster up on the top. And he was able to tell this young kid, I wasn't that young, but I was young academically, that everything you just did answered 2 or 3 of the questions I've been after for a long time. Even though he's not buying into the Christianity, he knew that there was a dynamic there that was pretty powerful. So, but perichoresis, it's I think a good, like that kid walking in the room, is a good example where I was able to just sense, why did my thought just change? Why am I restructuring that sentence a little bit different? And then I realized, oh yeah, it's because of where he's coming from, and it'll be more meaningful to him. And so it just switched. That's something that's happening at a spiritual level, way beyond, any knowledge I have and any knowledge he has. All that's contributing to the communication, but it's a spiritual communication.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking really here about the love of learning, the art of learning, or the love of conversation, because it's like I was saying earlier on about just going into any kind of relationality, if you like, with a kind of openness, is that I always take something from that interaction. It doesn't matter who it is. You'll learn something if you're open to it, and it'll change you. So it is a dynamic. It's a constant dynamic. It's a constant flow and exchange of ideas. And yeah, I mean, I use the word love, but it really is care and compassion and sympathy and empathy, all of these things. But it definitely has, for me, the critical point is the ability to change, the ability to transform. Yeah, that's how I interpret that.
Yeah, and Orthodox, the Orthodox Christians, their theology, they argue that, you can't know yourself outside of the other. And this is what perichoresis is all about as well. That, you're undefined until you get in front of difference. And then in that discussion and in that interaction, that's where you get to know yourself. And it's what it's what marriage is all about: sex, everything. So yeah.
Yep. That's fascinating.
Well, I think there might be a couple of other things that we want to touch on before we wrap up. And I've been making check marks as we go down the list of things that we're talking about. I'm the official. Check, check, got that done.
Yeah.
But there's something that you wrote at the beginning where you said within early Orthodox Christianity, spirit was originally understood in reference to the Trinity and given the status of personhood in relation to the Father and Son. Now, we've addressed a little bit of this in the Trinity and Perichoresis, but if we're talking about how this is extricated or extirpated, we might want to go into that a little bit more deeply.
Well,
Um, so,
there's yeah, on that issue of transcendence, because I didn't get this on the list, but it should have been on the list. Um, Spirit is transcendence, and where, like I was mentioning that so the extrication of spirit, but also the the perverting of the Christian concept, original concept of faith,
mhm.
is part of this, and faith is our actions and thoughts conditioned by the eternal and by God, as well as our culture and everything else. And if you go to Hebrews 11:1, that's the only definition where the Hebrew writer is just taking a shot at defining, just straight out defining faith. And ever since modernity, that passage has been mutilated to create a different understanding of what faith is. And when you read that one in the Greek, it'll say, faith is the hope. Gosh, I should look it up. But the hope of or the reality. This is what the Greek says. The Greek says it is the reality of that which is hoped for, which is future. It's the reality of that which is future, and it's the demonstration of that which is unseen. Now, only the King James, because it was written in the 1500s, pre-modern, pre-enlightenment, uses that translation. I think there might be a couple new ones that are trying to squeeze it in there, but every passage after that goes psychological rather than ontological.
Oh, that is interesting. I've just pulled up the King James version. Maybe you can point me to another version after I read it so that we can
Well,
see
yeah,
that.
yeah.
King
Go to
James, yeah, King
any
James
other
says,
version. Go
now
ahead.
faith is the substance of things hoped for, the
Right, or
evidence of
reality.
things not seen. Or
Right.
yeah. So let's
Now,
try.
anything else? Revised Standard.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Okay, now read that up.
New International. Now faith is confidence in what we
Yes.
hope for.
So now
And
it's a
assurance, yeah,
psychological.
assurance. Yeah, very interesting.
Okay? And so when I describe what Christian faith is, the difference between those two is that if I have the modern faith, Christian faith, it's that I'm being informed with knowledge by God in whatever it is I'm having faith in. So, in other words, say I have an experience where I'm transported into the future, and I see my daughter's wedding, and it's like uh, Christmas Carol. You're
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
being given information; you're being curated into the future,
Yeah.
and you get to see the real thing. So if that's the biblical concept of faith, rather than having information from some being or source saying that, and I have to trust, the being or the source that my daughter's going to get married. Now she takes off for her prom, and I get a call at midnight, and there's been an accident, and I need to get down to the hospital. Am I worried? And from a Christian standpoint, I'm not worried because I was literally at her wedding, and I saw it in the future somehow. I
Right,
saw it in the future,
right, right.
and that information was there because it was ontological. I was there, and if it's just you know and so anyways, that's you get the point, that's the difference between on how they perverted it into a psychological thing
Hmm.
that's based on everything around us. It's got it out of the element of the eternal, out of the transcending of time and space, which is the radicality of what is biblical faith.
Mhm.
And it's put it into a more psychological orientation. So it's part of the more than a dumbing down of Christianity. It's just it's a perverting of it that's happened. So that's how strong I think these forces are academically, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of switch gears a little bit, I just went and grabbed a book, and I won't hold this up to the camera because I'll send you the screenshots of this book. I've taken photographs, but when you say Trinity, I see symbols. Okay, I mean obviously the symbol of a triangle comes to mind. Yeah. Now there's a book here by George Bain, who's an artist who worked on the Celtic art, but his studies really led him into he basically was recreating knotwork patterns, and his first kind of studies were into the Book of Kells and the Book of Durrows, so ancient Christian texts from the Celtic Christian Church. But his studies led him into studying ancient languages. And when I look at symbols, yeah, because I can see in pictures. That's that's something that whether it was in me to begin with, probably, but definitely since Alan showed me how to think and how to critique and how to analyze things. And this is why language is such a key thing for me, where I have a passion for that. I have a passion for looking at the interconnectedness between. And so again, is it divinely inspired that this information comes towards me in many different forms? Who knows? Yeah, it's something God-given, you could say. But the symbols that are used for all of our letters of the English alphabet. If I just look at A here, now the typical A with a cross in the middle, with a line in the middle. If we look at the Phoenician A, you would just turn that 90 degrees on its side, and that's the Phoenician A. The Arabic is exactly the same. The Hebrew is slightly different, but it's very similar. But the point I'm going to make, and you'll see these on the screenshots, that literally every letter, the A, B, C, D, I mean, the Cypriot and the Phoenician D is basically an equilateral triangle. E, again, you have the Trinity in there, you have a triangle form. F, G, H, I not, but K, L, the Greek capital for L is a triangle. Yeah. Literally every letter through all of its forms, through its ancient forms, has the Trinity as its core. Literally every letter. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing when you look in, you can really see the interconnectedness. And he's got Indian language, he's got Sinai script, he's got Moabite script. He's also dug into some of the ancient Ruinans, the ancient kind of Nordic script. And again, somebody like Barry Fell, I did send you some information about Barry Fell, Greg, and Alan's linked to him and talked about his books. But he's showing you the interconnectedness of these symbols that go thousands of years into history, long before Christianity. So when you say to me Trinity, I really see that concept embedded in the symbols of all of our languages, the ancient languages. Yeah. So it's interesting. I just have a little bit of a different way of interpreting that.
Yeah, and today you're probably looking at 80% of Christianity will have nothing to do with it. It's just been so drained out over the last 500 years.
Why is that?
Well, I think I'm getting to the point where I've listened to enough Alan that I'm really becoming dangerous in the theological world because I'm getting. I mean, it's things I probably won't ever write about, but and then you throw mix in a little Sean Ross in there, and uh, and so I look back at things like the Reformation, and especially the Swiss Reformation, and it just brings so much more understanding to me when you've got Calvin. And I'd always heard about Calvin, and I never bought into Calvin because of the predestination aspect of it. It was more of a deterministic model. Same with Zwingli up in Zurich. But historical theology, you're going to learn that Geneva was was a prison. You acted according to the rules, all this. And I'm going, where's this guy coming from? I mean, just read Hebrews, read, what is Jesus talking about on the Sermon on the Mount? I mean, it's the eliminating or rules, or at least taking the concept of what rules was trying to do, moving it to a new paradigm. Mm-hmm. And then what you had is this huge onslaught of Anabaptists, which were much more sensitive and theologically adept at concepts of the Spirit. And these guys were, I think in one day, 51 people in Geneva were burned to death. Oh, no, excuse me. Many of them were burned to death, but it was 51 Anabaptists were drowned to death in Zurich, in the Zurich Sea, for being Anabaptists. And so, you just look at that as you chalk it up to, well, that's 1,500 years ago. That would never happen now. Mm-hmm. And but in the end, whenever you have to kill on disputes like that, you've already lost. Mm-hmm. You've exposed that you've lost, I think. And so in other words, there were forces at play, I think, geopolitically at that point that made sure the money went to Calvin and Zwingli. And actually, where Zwingli was part of the drowning, the Calvinists will say, well, he didn't do it. It was the government around him that did it. The small, it was Geneva that did it. And but he condoned. He took. He did certain things that we've got in print where he condoned it, mm-hmm. that sort of thing. And so, all of that is just a shaping of. And then you get into what comes out of the Reformed thought. Very little intelligence and effort and research put into what is spirit. Mm-hmm. It's all very Christocentric, and that's all fine and dandy. But you've got to have, and that goes all the way up to Karl Barth, right after World War II and during World War II, really. Gets his PhD, goes back, starts, he's Swiss, not German, but he gets his PhD in Germany, goes back, and then he's yanked out and privileged monetarily in every way. He writes one article and he ends up being a professor at Basel, taught out his life there. And I was influenced by Barth for my undergraduate. By the end of my undergraduate, I'd kind of outgrown him and start seeing things that weren't there. And he's very undeveloped on the notion of spirit. And so he's really hard on Christology. And I'm not. I'm hard on the relationship between the three. That something's going on in that relationship. And then you throw that back. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we've been going on a while, and we may consider why I could talk about this for another hour or two, but we may make a part 2 here. But I'm still curious, and I'm going to ask you the question if you can explain to us the difference an emphasis on Christology will give us as opposed to an emphasis on spirit or the Trinity, the relating of all three. Because just when you say that, especially when you're talking about Zwingli, I already have thoughts that come to mind based on experiences that I've had where I can feel the bad direction that that's taken us.
Well, the emphasis on Christology just obviates so many themes and realities in Scripture and in Christian tradition, to where you've got to look at, you can't parse any of these three apart in the Trinity, so that you've got these whole passages like Matthew 25, where you've got Christ saying that kingdom come, I'll be dividing the sheep with the goats, and those that clothed and fed others in me, he goes, it fed and clothed me. In other words, related with me in a cognitive way. That's the sheep, and those that didn't were the goats. And then there's this mass confusion, and so there's people among the sheep that go, I never did that. I had nothing to do with Christianity. There's going to be that kind of an objection, and you'll say, oh, you did, anonymously. You were all over me, and you did it. Even if you did it to the least of these, anybody, to the poor, that you clothed them or you fed them, you did it to me, because he's in the midst. He's the one holding everything together. He's the one creating all this. And then you'll have on the opposite end, and then you can flash back to Matthew 7, and Jesus kind of goes, there will be many, not a few, who will say, we were Christians and we did all these great works in your name.
Yeah.
And I will say to them, I never knew you. So, what do you do with Christology on that? In other words, there has to be a deeper element to Christology. There has to be a deeper element to us knowing Christ. And then you get to that passage I mentioned earlier about where Christ even says, you can blaspheme me or speak against me, and it will be forgiven you, but it will not be forgiven if you blaspheme or resist the Spirit. So in other words, the only way to truly know anybody, for me to truly know you or to know Christ, I've got to be so wide open that I become spirit. And then the Spirit of God can speak to me, or your spirit can speak to me, and I get an encounter. Truth is the same thing. You don't get truth or faith at all if you don't have true openness.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't really know enough. I have a basic understanding of the Protestant Reformation, but where it led to great divisions in thought, I can't go there. But I, I, having grown up in a religious area, and of course, I'm in the Bible Belt, so I'm exposed to all kinds of, from evangelical to mainline Protestantism, and some Catholics in there as well. And one thing that I'm a keep it simple kind of person, and one way that I've always kept it simple is, you put it on a bracelet, but what would Jesus do, right? It's real simple. It's kind of silly, but you're in a bubble, you're in a group, you're in a room, you're in a relationship, and the person, it's especially frustrating when it happens with someone who calls themselves a Christian, and they are hate-filled and judgmental and backstabbing and hypocritical and determined to undermine you. They're like a control freak Karen because you're not doing it right. And to me, this is way beyond the antithesis of Christianity into something that is actually it's look back to what you were saying about Zwingli and the killings that happen in the name of Christianity. This is you could say demonic, but it's hate filled, and it's all around us. It's all around us with people who profess to be Christians. And I think that there is something, I don't know enough about the history of it, but I think that there's something there about extirpating spirit.
Yeah. No, I think so. No, I mean that's the element of the Reformation has always been very weak. Luther was much more complex in his understanding of spirit, and so when I encountered all these guys in undergraduate, I dumped the other two right away. But I held on to Luther just because he had developed that a little bit more. But and my friends, the ones that I connected with within my discipline and just spiritual community, ended up being more charismatics and Pentecostals because they based. I wasn't one of them. Technically, I was a mystic. I was a Christian mystic. So that's the ones when I read books, I connected with St. John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila and Thomas Merton for a modern one. But both of those based their faith, Pentecostals and myself, on experience deeply, and they read Scripture through that, and this is not. And when I say Pentecost, I never mean Pentecostal.
Right,
I mean,
right.
That's a term that's something else completely. In that respect, and I think even much of Pentecostalism has been a perversion of the concept of spirit, Christian concept, and part of the whole thing of in trying to write a book on the delusion, the coming delusion, and the perverting of Christianity. I've got work to do on that level within a Pentecostal element of it. I mean, isn't it interesting that all this starts with 1891 and the Milner Group, and then just a little bit of a precursor with Darby and everybody in the middle 19th century have got something going, but we see it kind of get manifested in something that we can read about from 1891 on, and then just fast forward a decade, and then something that has never been there in Christianity before pops up, Asuza Street. And this births Pentecostalism. And so, and even though that's where a lot of my friends are at, I've lived a life now, alongside a lot of those guys, and it's been a rough ride for them. And so I have questions on that. And if nothing else, it has to be cleaned up, and better understanding has to come about the Spirit and how the Spirit works with us within those denominations. But I'm very open for the fact too that they've been manhandled. And
yeah, I mean, I think Alan's really touching on that, and that in the redux you're going to put up, Melissa, November the 22nd, 2020. Alan's touched on these things a number of times in regards to religion and how there are profound truths, and you mentioned that today. There are profound truths embedded with all religions, really, but certainly within Christianity. And he emphasizes the point again. There are higher truths there to seek. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's what he's saying, and he touches on that. He takes it again. Alan's speaking in kind of different tones and different levels and and different shades and different colors. There's always something different. It might sound like he's repeating something, but he's not. He's giving you a different way of looking at it. And he says that you want to attack religion, and you want to attack the priests, and you want to attack the deviancy within that organizations. He says, but you fail to look at the culture, the degradation of culture, and that's where your ministers are coming from. That's where the priests are coming from. He's telling you, look somewhere else. There's a higher system above this that's actually degrading the whole of culture.
right.
Not through religion is important, because I think Jung touches on this, and certainly Etienne Gilson touches on this. If with a cognition of God, which is a precondition of your real being, of you becoming a real being, based in truth, based in reality. You can protect yourself against this. You can protect yourself against degradation. Etty and Gilson and Young are both saying you can only do that with a cognition of God. You can only do it that way. And it was interesting when you both were talking there, my grandfather just came to mind. Yeah. Here's a non-religious person,
Yeah.
who was blaspheming the church. He would say, he would say, oh, it's the holy willies. Yeah. He would use that. But I tell you, he was probably, in my own experience, he was probably the only Christian I've ever experienced.
Very possibly, yeah.
Because he was truthful, he was honest, he didn't stab anybody. He really hated to hear people talk about other people if those persons weren't present. He hated it. And that's why he hated soaps. He hated soap dramas and TV. He would shout that TV off. He would tell my grandmother, get that rubbish off, he would say. But I tell you, he was obviously, and he couldn't, and he never expressed this to me, but I think that I obviously got a lot of impulse from a lot of, definitely a lot of his characteristics, his behaviors, but his values as well, his morals. But he was in a redemptive state. There's no doubt about it, because he never blasphemed God, and that was proven on his deathbed. He obviously knew God at that point, because he knew where he was going, and he said that he was going somewhere else. My journey is not complete. I'm going somewhere. So when you were talking there, I was just thinking, yeah, that's exactly what happened to my grandfather.
Yeah. Well, and then that's reflected by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the far greater, more well-read theologian than myself. And just before his death, by hanging in the prison, if you don't know how he ended, he lived a martyr's life. He got to the point in his prison letters and papers and through communications that with friends and family, to where he actually said, of the 30-some people that signed that document for the potential assassination, but at least an effort to remove Hitler from power, if even needed assassination, he said there was only 3 or 4 professing Christians on that group, and yet on his deathbed, his theology had shifted enough to where he said, I think everybody on that committee was Christian. And then when he looked back at the 95% of the Lutheran Church that was either complicit with Hitler or silently compliant, I mean, he got that nasty about it. And he said that's 95% of the German Lutheran Church. He doubted their faith. So, I mean, that's a pretty strong thing to happen to a fairly, what you'd call evangelical Christian. And I think, and I agree with him on those points, that we don't know, we don't, the spirit is far, when you look at who a person is and what consciousness is, it's worse than the iceberg. We always look at that iceberg image. Yeah. I think there's so little above water in our consciousness.
Yeah.
And, and you got McGilchrist saying that 95% of all of our decisions are unconscious. And we know that now. And these are actual decisions we're making, but they're unconscious. And then you get, what's his name at UCLA saying, and 98% of that 5% that's conscious that goes into making that decision is unconscious. So, I mean, so when a person says, goes to church and does all that, that's like right in one ear and out the other. Yeah. For me. And then, I have to spend time with you before I can even get an indication where whether I think you're on the redemptive path or not. And I'll never make a firm judgment one way or the other. It's just too deep for us.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know how much further you want to go on, Melissa, because I mean, I haven't I touched on some things, but there's so many different ideas with the with extirpation of spirit. Of course, Alan's been a big, you know, guide for me, but again, going through the waiting for the miracle, which we've done, Alan's showing you how deep it runs, even into architecture, and it's something that I'm kind of focused on, and I'm convinced of that through the symbols that they project to us in this system, that in itself, I think, because like Greg says, we're technically in a hypnotic state. That's what these symbols do, is they create a hypnotic state in us. I mean, yeah, I copied that text from Waiting for the Miracle that Alan puts in very right at the start of right at the start of Cutting Through the Matrix. By symbols is man guided and commanded, made happy, made wretched. He everywhere finds himself surrounded, recognized as such, or not recognized. Alan literally starts off the book with the importance of symbols. And I see, I mean, for me, they're all around. They're in your language, they're in your architecture, they're in your structures of law, money. Yeah,
What comes right before that, though, is one of the lines in that book
yeah,
that struck me
yeah,
the hardest, especially after he died, and I read it again. It's page 5 of
yeah,
the first edition. He
yeah,
says, "This is the final phase of humanity as we know it."
that's right. That's right.
Sound. What does it say after that?
Sounds shocking.
Sound shocking. Yes. Then go back to your
Go
television
back to
vision.
your go back to your programming, because
Yeah.
again, and that's why it then follows on from symbols,
Yeah.
because if we even look at the architecture, Alan explains this in a number of talks to Jackie, that the physicality, the material world is within your religious writings, if you want, or it's within your architecture, because he's talking here about the skull, yeah, the temple, and the skull's a big symbol. It's huge in Chaldean lore as well. About literally the creation story comes from Belios, I think, who cuts off his head, and the women knead the blood into earth, and thus there springs man. Yeah, so it's a different variation of God creating man out of the dust and then breathing the nostrils into there. It's a slightly more brutal one with the Chaldeans, but still, you see, we're matter, and this is all geared towards us hypnotically believing, well, we're just another animal, really, aren't we? We're just matter. There's nothing godly in us. There's nothing imbued by the Creator in us. Again, the complete opposite of what Alan's saying is that we are spirit. We're descended into matter for a very good purpose and a very good reason. So he's talking about the 33 degrees, and that's why the 33 degrees are so important, because it's the bones of the spinal cord. You have 33 of them. Yeah, and that's where you have the alpine. Yeah, the alpines. It's a anagram of spinal. So you go up the 30 degrees into the portal, which is the skull, and the skull's important, and that's part of the reason. Once you get into the skull, you go up to the upper temple, the upper room. You can find the same stories, which are thick 6,000 years old at least, of going up the stairs, up the degrees, through the portal, the door, which is guarded by Atlas. Atlas is the name they give to the bone on which the head swivels. So you go up into the upper chamber, the upper room, where again you have the story of Jesus taking his disciples. The 12 disciples are simply the 12 signs of the zodiac going through the Son of God, 13. So your knowledge is contained for an individual in your head through the mind, okay? That's what it literally means. So they give you all these stories. That's what he's basically saying. But then
Yeah.
he covers that in another talk where he's got it here. Yes. So that he's telling you that the higher clergy, the high elite are well aware of these things because
Oh,
it
yes.
doesn't matter. You always have an elite within the Protestant movement or the Catholic movement or Brahmanism or Judaism. There's always a higher elite which you don't see. And he says they're well aware of these things.
Yep.
They're well aware of the meanings in them because they're given a proper education. It's like I said, when you read somebody like I've mentioned a book before, Alan's mentioned him, a fantastic book written in a different language that I've got to stop every 2 minutes and check what does that word mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm also a bit dyslexic like you, Greg. But still, these words are new to me. But T.E. Lawrence, Seven Pillars of Wisdom, it's a fantastic book because these books are written in a symbolic language. So if you can understand them, there's lots of meaning behind why they're writing certain things. And he mentions the skull. He mentions the skull in that book.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then that whole thing on degrees. Oh, in fact, Melissa, you read that off about, um, uh, Alan opening up with that line, and the opening line of the book that's coming out my book coming out in a few weeks or a few months is, it's a quote unquote in the beginning. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine.
Mm-hmm.
So that little riff from REM, isn't that what the prodigal son said as he left the relative safety and only world he had ever known? He set off to explore new worlds and his deepest passions. My Greek is a little rusty, but I remember Jesus saying something similar to that in the story of the prodigal son. Double or nothing, the young man had wanted it all or nothing, whatever all was. He sensed it was out there and that it was really important and that he didn't have it. So, and that's the cycle that happens with every culture and every epic and every human being. Yeah.
So just to finish off the point,
Sorry.
talking about there's not a single part of the structure of the church or architecture that's not part of the human anatomy. Again, drawing you down to matter. A spiritual being having a material existence for a reason is eliminating this extirpation of spirit. This is ancient for me, and this is what I see. This is how I interpret this. And he says, so the vault, you've got the arch, you have your ribs of the arch, you have the mouth itself. The word glossa is the old term for tongue in Saxon, which is right. You can look that up.
Glossolalia is speaking in tongues.
Yeah. So your tongue also means power of speech. And your power, that's a tower. That's right. I mean, if you look at the old languages here, the P and the T are pretty much interchangeable in the old languages. And again, they're made either with a triangle symbol without a base or switched around. Just turn it 90 degrees. You'll see it. So it's surrounded by your mouth. Your mouth's old name in Anglo-Saxon is moat. Yeah? Or that's still used in the German dialect today. It's still used in some parts of Germany as moat, your mouth. Mund also, but in dialect they say moat because they changed the vowels, you see. And some of the letters change, or they're softened, or they're exaggerated. It's also where you have a moat surrounded with water inside your mouth. They use the various dental signs on tower walls. You'll see them. They're little squares, little teeth on the walls, and they're all over these city walls around Germany. Yeah, it's fascinating to see this. But that's the teeth which protect, and that's also where you get the word paladin, the palate, the guardians of the people in the tower. He goes on. So it's more than just your mind. You have a temple on either side of your brow of your head. You have a crown on your head, which is your arch. You have an arch on your foot. Your foot stands on the ground. It's what you walk with, your pediment. The bottom of a pillar is called a pediment, a pedestal. It stands on a rock. Yeah. And then he goes into the pupil of the eye, the self, the eye. Yeah. So again, you go. This goes on and on and on through their symbols.
Hmm.
And for me, I really see this as almost a hypnotic trance because the symbols are repeated. There's no doubt about it. If you look around, those symbols that I was telling you, if you understand it, they're repeated. It's repetition. It's constant repetition. And this, I think, not only does it hypnotize us, but those symbols we take in through our senses, mainly our eye, the window of the soul. That's again what he's saying. The eye is the window of the soul. That's why you have a window um, in the church. Yeah. Um, not only do I think that they hypnotize us, but I also think they go deep inside. You know, you can use subconscious or unconscious if you want, but they go into our being and they manifest. I think Jung touches on this in the fourth chapter. There, he touches on how these archetypal symbols will, if you're not aware of them, if you're not conscious of them, and can critically analyze them, then they will manifest in you and they will come out in some kind of deviancy.
Mm-hmm.
They will manifest in some kind of misbehavior, and you're not even aware of it. It's again, it's on a hypnotic or an unconscious level. So they're very powerful. And I don't think we really understand this. And this is what Alan is trying to emphasize over and over and over again.
Something that you make me think too is we set this up. There are a couple of different ways about the eradication of spirit. We can start with the early church or a few hundred years ago. But if you think about Alan's idea about religion and a deviant priest class that has always been involved in that, what you were just reading made me think it has always been this way because a lot of the concepts that are so beautiful about God relating to Jesus predate Christianity, and a knowledge of eternity predates Christianity. And the desire to interact with eternity and the divine predates Christianity.
Yeah.
These are ideas that are beautifully conveyed within Christianity, but they come before, and it's that constant don't look up, look down, you know, including in the architecture. The architecture keeps us grounded.
Yeah.
The references to the body keep us grounded. Don't look up. Don't look up. Look down. Stay in matter.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 I think that's very true. It's very true. It's very material orientated. I mean, because if you think about it, it's a building, a structure. It's something that man would do naturally to provide them shelter for the elements, for sheltering the elements. So it's a natural thing that we do. So then that's taken that idea of sheltering ourselves to protect ourselves, to survive in nature, is then taken off and spun off. And then what you have is these massive Gothic cathedrals that are just, you can really see why you would think God has built that. Because
Well, yeah, and you know, as Alan takes the symbolism of the spire and the obelisk, and what does he tell us that that represents? It's a finger to God.
yes, of
It's
course.
it's
What you have in there,
yeah,
the spire, the spirit, the sprite,
yep.
yeah, you have that word in there. So of
Hmm.
course, it represents anatomy, and
Yeah,
we're very clear on that, yeah.
yeah,
And in the church itself, Alan shows you this, and I know lots of people don't like to go there, but you are really the archway and the keystone is representing the vulva. That's obvious. And the spire itself represents the phallic symbol. So you're really you're entering a hermaphroditic building. That's, and again, Alan has shown you this. So, that type of thinking, I know lots of people don't like to go there, and I can see why lots of people would convey an idea that that's blasphemous or that's attacking religion. Alan was not doing that. Alan was not doing that at all. People have misread that. For me, when I hear people say that generally, when I hear that, I see projection. It's because you yourself, just like my granddad, was projecting his own anger, his own fears onto people for going to the church. That's what other people are doing. They're projecting their own anger, their own hatred on something they probably don't understand, but it's an easy target. Hence why here in Germany just now, huge, huge attack on the Catholic Church. Deviant priesthoods, pedophiles, these types of things. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, but that exists in your culture.
Right.
That has existed in this culture pre-Catholic, pre-Christian times. So we can't get stuck there. It's a culture degradation. It's always been there, like you said. When you click on the camera, when you click on the filter to look at history, that's what you see. Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's the same with the fire. The fire symbol. Alan is showing you that they've taken something that we've clearly been able to establish ourselves. It's something that we've created ourselves. Again, I believe that a lot of these symbols come from our own creative minds. I think they've stolen a lot of our ideas, taken them off. Alan says we forgot that we used fire for cooking, and now we worship it as the holy fire. Yeah, so it's true. It's absolutely true.
I don't know if it's something that you put out, Melissa. I read too many different things and I forget where they come from. But it might have been Nordengard just put something up on his site that was about beauty, about the whole thing of symbols, and it goes back to, God, I think it was a turn of the century or something like that, or turn of the millennia, when an army came out of Russia down, just taking over and conquering, and they came into, I think it was Constantinople, and what they saw there architecturally, I mean, these battle-hardened armies just stood there in front of the architecture and just lost it. And they ended up, and they just said, whatever God is here, so they ended up, converting to Christianity basically because of the architecture, just the beauty in it. And then you've got, the symbology, just all of that speaks. Subconsciously.
Well, there's no doubt that that there's something beautiful about walking into one of these cathedrals, into the vulva, with the spire. It isn't all grounding you in matter, but the basic architecture does that. Still, would I rather worship in one of these ancient cathedrals as opposed to a mega church that's built like a stadium? I mean, there's a big, huge difference. Or the so-called praise music that happens with drums and guitars, which doesn't elevate me at all. Or listening to Gregorian chant, or Russian Orthodox men's choir. See, I mean, it's hands down a huge difference in what it's going to fill your spirit with and make you think. But nonetheless, even within this transcendent beauty that might stop an army and convert them to Christianity, the architecture is it's matter, it's earth, it's the male and the female principle becoming the hermaphrodite, because this is their religion. We get
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And they've got everybody fold up this hierarchy. They've got every single person within it fold. There's only a few at the top that understand the symbology of this. Yeah. And so what you're talking about, Melissa, when you understand the symbology now, and this is why Alan was, and he knew he was going to be controversial, and he knew he was going to shock people with these statements. That's what he said. That he's warning you. He's warning you're going to be shocked when you read this. That's why he's warning you. But what it's showing you is that the antiquity of this system, how deep it runs within you, how deep it runs, and Jung's touching on these things, how deep it runs within your psyche, but how deep it runs in your soul, how it's manifested in your spirit, how the things you do, the things you say, the things you think are literally this system is talking through you. It is breathed life into your nostrils. You are elevated. You are animated by it. You are pneumatically controlled by it. Pneuma. So, and that runs deep. And so that's why that's what Alan's technique was to show you how old this system was. And if you want to call it mind control or whatever, how old it was. He's mentioning because Jackie was trying to kind of use these kind of terminologies, mind control, and Alan's basically saying, look, mind control is nothing new. Right. You know, because she wants to focus on MK Ultra or people want to stick there, but mind control is ancient. It's integral. Right. It's part of this system. So of course, when you see one of these cathedrals and you walk in them, and I've seen performances myself in a lot of these cathedrals, beautiful performances, musical performances. It moves you, it animates you, it gives you thoughts, it stirs emotions. It's scientifically designed to do so. It's going to imprint you with senses. It's going to imprint you with feelings. It's going to imprint you with emotion. Everything. It's done perfectly. That should make you go and wake up and start to question. Okay, why is it doing that? Because I have a different experience. I mean, I don't go into one of these cathedrals or likes of the Kölner Dome in Germany. I must admit, I'm probably more inclined to go, my goodness, that wasn't God that built that. I think that was the devil. But you understand, you're in awe of it, but it's scary.
It's scary, yeah.
They're scary. And I mean, of course, they show you that with the gargoyles outside, and that's the imprint they're meant to leave as well, is the fact that they are causing fear in you. Yeah, I've been to Roslyn Chapel as well, and there's some hideous features in these in the architecture there. It's for a reason. It's to create fear. It's to create terror. It's to create, agitation. All of these things. So they're definitely able to imprint or give you an image in, your imagination. And I don't think it leaves you. I don't think those things leave you. They're not meant to leave you.
Yeah.
No. It's interesting.
Very. So I think we are going to wrap this one up. But before I sign off and quit recording, I wanted to just ask Greg if you could tell us, especially related to the conversation that we've been having, a bit about some of the books that you've written.
Well, the original book that was 2 years ago, you don't want to read. That's the one that's the PhD dissertation. It's really thick. It's it goes into 7 different disciplines of thought quite deeply. So you got to know communications theory, social theory, quantum physics, things like that. And it's and each one of those go in. The language is kind of difficult if you're not used to it. So for that, it's written for maybe 100 people, that are doing research in that area and that. So I've had friends make a go at it and they get something out of it. But the one that's coming out in a couple months is From One Degree to Another. And that's basically, it started out as a rereading of The Prodigal Son. And it's kind of morphed into, in fact, I think the byline on it was From One Degree to Another, the spirit and the life of of Jacob and the prodigal. And so that's a little bit more accessible. And I tried to make it accessible publicly. By the time I got done, it's probably going to be for seminarians and people like that. But I think a lot of people can get stuff out of it. I've had it read by friends, and they get a large part of it.
It's for more than 100 people.
It's for more than 100 people. And then I've got 3 articles that are out there. If you just punch my full name in, those will generally come up on search engines. Those can be a little bit thick too, but and the one about religious or pluralistic Christian hypothesis. In other words, how is God working outside of Christianity from a Christian standpoint? That's out on. In fact, a Swiss publisher has that up right now on religions theology. But if you just punch in my name, and these things will generally pop up. And so there's 3 articles out there you can get that are online.
Okay, well, we can talk about it afterwards, but what I might do is publish Perichoresis on the website in the article section, or I can publish it on Substack under your name. I've put up pieces of it, I think, for book club, but I can share that.
Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure what that is.
You shared some writing on perichoresis with me some months back. I'll show it to you before I publish it.
Are you talking about the Perelandra acid trip?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you say you had a website, Greg? Or were you working?
Yeah, that's just made. Nobody knows about that yet. That's for academics. My publisher is saying that I should have an academic website that introduces me to other academics. But you can visit it. It's just my name, full name, Gregory Gorsuch. .com.
Okay, and so, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
In fact, you can get those 3 papers right there. Download them.
Okay, well, that's perfect. That's great. That should be good enough. And also down the road, do you want to share the idea, or is that one under a hat right now?
Oh, the other ones? I don't know what's just coming next, because the plan is, the coming delusion. That I got excited about when I started reading Jung. I thought I better do that one next. And now I'm backing off and thinking that I need to do a very, very accessible one on perichoresis while I'm on this roll. Mm-hmm. And that'll be simple, really short. And I need to get that out. And then I'll probably end up doing the coming delusion after that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. That sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I will wish you well. I think that the upcoming is going to be the second Thursday of the month, and so that's Neil Foster. And we've been told by Sandy Adams that she's going to join us, and I hope that works out, because Sandy has done a very extensive research into Agenda 21, what we can call Agenda 2030 now, but we wanted to talk with her a bit about that, because there are a lot of changes that are coming down quickly, and how does this affect us? We can kind of see around us that we're being threatened with shortages of all kinds: food, fuel, money, etc. And this all ties into the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 plan. So that'll be next week. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Been a pleasure talking to you both. Always is.
Yep. See you later.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, I've got something that the world didn't my father